Let's talk toy smiles. There are a couple of different ways to go with mouths, and we're going to talk about those in this video. Hi, I'm Sarah from Imagine Landscapes, and I hope this video helps you put on a little personality. If you are unsure about your sewing skills, one of the best ways to do it is just a little 3-stitch wide mouth. If you just make sure that the center stitch is a little bit lower than the other two, it will look a little smiley and a little pensive and pretty friendly. And that's a nice easy start. And we will talk about that one in a little more detail. Another way to do it is to give yourself a mouth with some straight sides, a bit of a straight middle, and then some diagonals here to make a nice smiley face, like you can see here or here. The narrower the mouth, the easier it is to get this line looking smooth on bigger toys. If you want the smile quite large, you may find you need to undo and redo the smile several times to get the stitching exactly lining up in a bit more of a smooth line. And of course you can go just straight up mouthless, because that is also a sweet little personality. Start with a length of yarn that you want to use for your smile. Black is a nice classic because the safety eyes are also black, but feel free to experiment. Once the yarn's on a yarn needle, just have a look at your toy. One of the things to do is to count the number of stitches between your eye. Either count the plain stitches in between or sort of use the eye where you know it went into. So for instance, I know that this one is in between these two stitches because of course we knit going top down. So in fact it is exactly centered in this row. When we were knitting this way, we did that purl stitch, and then we did it in this row. So then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we have 12 stitches between, not including the columns where the safety eyes are. And depending on whether you have an even number or an odd number will kind of change how to center. If you have an even number of stitches, you need to do an even number in the center of your mouth, and if you have an odd number, you need to do an odd number in order to center it. In other words, if we were going to do just a little mouth and we did a 3-stitch mouth, let's do like this, say, that would then be off center no matter where we put it, because an odd number in an even number will look a little off. Whereas if we did a 4-stitch, we can actually center that. Or we could do a 2-stitch. So do some counting, do some figuring out, and figure out how high you want the bottom of your mouth to be. So in this case, all right, so if this is my center, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some investigations with a small bit of yarn. So do I want a flat mouth? Do I want a smiley mouth? If I want a smiley mouth, how big do I want it? Now this is, you're going to notice it's always going to be trying to flop over, and it's going to make it a little hard for me to give you a tutorial with it straight without always holding it, because we've put weighted stuffing in the bottom. So just be aware that this is going to constantly want to be on a bit of an angle rather than flat to the camera. All right, so a really big mouth is going to use a lot more stitching, and if you are not so sure, you might want to do a smaller mouth and require fewer stitches. You can also sort of think about the angle you want. Do you like this sort of angle on your smile? In terms of making it easy, straight lines are easy, so having a very steep side to your smile does make it a little easier to do. So just sort of think about that. Once you sort of have a sense of where you want it and what you think would look good, I recommend and you can even like stop, like, so I think this is, my little strip here is too long, so I'm actually gonna cut that off. One thing you can do is take several pictures and look at the pictures to see what you like. When we are placing things and doing final styling, it's always great to take pictures, because when you're comparing photographs, it's much easier for your eye to figure out which one you like. So if you like this, then what I would do is I would mark the upper and outer edges somehow. So I would use maybe a needle and go down where I want the top of that line to go and come up where I want it to end. If I do that, then I've already given myself two guidelines. I've given myself guidelines top bottom in terms of where that smile line is going to start and stop, and I've also given myself the side to side marking there. So now that we do that, let's double check that we are in fact centered. I'm halfway through, there's half a stitch there, then a full stitch, full stitch, full stitch, full stitch, full stitch, half a stitch. So this is uneven here on terms of our center line. So to actually be centered, so again, once you've got this, you really want to make sure, like sort of count over from the eyes, look at the center line and decide, is this actually centered? So if you like that, let's go back to my little mimic here. Let's say we're doing this. Is this how deep we want it? I actually want mine a little bit up from there, so I am going to go a bit more like this. So my bottom will go here. And that would make my smile even shorter than what I've got here. So let's see if we would like the way that looks. So we'll line it up that way. And then I think that does look pretty cute. We'll cut that off to confirm. So there we go. I've sort of got my top and widest points, and then I've got my bottom points, and now it's time to get stitching. I've also taken a moment to make sure that I am where I want to be in terms of centered from the eyes and from the center line we did, so that we won't have to do this hopefully more than once. Although the nice thing about embroidery is you can gently pull everything back and get everything sorted again. I'm gonna start with my yarn at the bottom and come up one stitch down from where I want the top of this to be. I'm not going to pull the yarn all the way through. I'm just going to leave that tail to hang out there. All right, so we're going to use back stitch. So I'm sort of one stitch or one ladder. If you look at the yarn, between the stitches there are these running strands, also called ladders, and if it gapes too much you can get what's called laddering. So we're going to use those to kind of anchor things. So I'm one of those ladders below where I'd like to be. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to go one past where I want to do. So this current from this point to where I came up is too wide compared to the size of the stitches. Don't pull too hard. If you pull too firmly, this will disappear down beneath. All right, so now I'm going to go one stitch size back and two stitch sizes down. That's how back stitch works. All right, so now I've got two that are straight, and it's probably actually time for this to have started a bit of a diagonal. So rather than doing my next stitch, I'm just going to move this over half a stitch, and I'm going to do that by getting caught on my DPN here over and over again. I'm just going to go down where I came up, making sure not to split the yarn. Just going to go down where I came up, and I'm just going to go over half a stitch to start that diagonal. And that's just going to move our starting point over. So rather than starting here, now we're starting here. So again, we're going to go up to where the last bit of stitching is, and then we go wider so that the yarn that is working here is kind of always halfway between the stitch that's going to be made and where the next stitch is going to start. Do another diagonal with where we put it. And now I'm going to pull this out because it's really getting in my way. And so I want this one to be diagonal, this one to be straight. So wherever your yarn comes out is sort of pointing the direction for the next stitch. So this bit will be diagonal still, but this bit will be straight. So now we'll do, going straight's nice and easy because you just go one stitch over and come up one stitch to the other side. And we'll do that one more time. I'll do 3 straight stitches here at the bottom. Again, making sure you don't pull too tightly. So now that this will be my 3rd straight stitch, then I need to start doing diagonals. So let's see, that first diagonal was a full V of the stitches wide. So I will go a full V over, but then I need to also go up. So let's go up. So that'll give us that diagonal. Then we need a little bit more of a diagonal to get in line with this bit here, because we're sort of doing a 1.5 stitches wide in this smile there at the end. And then we just go straight up. And we get our smile line nice and straight. So I'm going to come down and I'm just going to go all the way back down to the bottom. Pull that through, and then we're going to have a look. All right. Again, don't pull that too tight. We don't want that smile to disappear. So that looks reasonably cute. If any of the lines aren't quite the way you want, play around with the needle and just lift them and see if you can get them to do what you want. If things aren't right, just take the needle out, pull this last stitch out and just go stitch by stitch back, and you can fix what you have got there. What do we do with these ends? Well, I like to, once they're close side by side, I should have brought them out identically side by side, but you can always move ends over like we already did. We just come down where we went up, making sure not to split either the black yarn or the yarn of the fabric around us. And we can come down just beside where we came up. We don't want to come identically. We want some stitch in between. And then we can just tie a knot. And we want that really close. When I said we're almost but not quite side by side, I mean like split the strand of yarn by like 1/2 stitch at most. Okay, make sure when you're doing this that you don't over tighten, because that is something that I tend to do, and then this wants to pop in, as does this. So just make sure that when you tie these knots, you don't go too hard. And then what you're just gonna do, bury the first end into your stuffy, come down somewhere and come out across, pull it taut and snip right close to the fabric, and it will pop in. And then if we can, when we bury this one, we're gonna pull on it to hopefully pull the end of the knot right through and inside of our stuffy here and make it go away. So let's come out over here. And let's see if we pull nice and tight, how are we gonna do? It may be that I needed to tie those knots much closer to the surface or much closer to each other, and that I split too much of a stitch here. Want to do a little mouth? Let's do a little 3-stitch mouth. So first of all, I'm gonna make sure I'm centered between my eyes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So stitch 5 is gonna be the center. And I'm gonna do this one for this toy 4 stitches up from where the color changes. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to put it about there. So that'll be our center stitch. I'm gonna push the yarn up through, underneath, And I'm going to come up to the side of the stitch that I want. So that should be stitch number 5. And I'm going to leave yarn at the end here. Now with backstitch, you always come up sort of to the left of where you're going. So this first stitch will be made by going to the right, and then I'm going to go under, and I'm going to go under 2 stitches sideways. And we will make a stitch over one of our knit stitches like that. And now we have to go back. That's where the back stitch comes. So we go over on this side, and I come up 2 stitches away. And now this is the third one. So I'm just going to go straight down, and I'm going to come back out over here where my other end came through. So now I'm going to pull that. And depending on how we style this mouth, it can be more or less pensive. If we push this middle one down a little bit, we can kind of force a little bit of a smile just by nudging these around a little bit. If you want them to be on more of a diagonal, you can do that. But I like to keep this little mouth very simple and just sort of like a slightly thoughtful little smile, like just a little welcoming smile.